Hello, everyone, and welcome to another, well, unique video of mine, I guess, one that stands a little bit out. So in this video, obviously, when you get passionate about something and when you kind of take interest in something and want to pursue something, you start to have questions. You become more interested, you become a little bit more inquisitive, and you want to know more. And over the years, I've built up a lot of questions. Sometimes it was easy questions that I could easily answer. Others were more complex and maybe needed me to understand more what's going on. And over the years, I've built up quite a lot of questions that I had, especially about the gaming world that I wish to enter at some point. And I thought I would start summing it up in videos. Maybe start answering my own questions with my own research or throwing it out there, maybe that someone somewhere could answer it. So, yeah, I thought it would be something interesting. I'm not sure if I'm going to have more videos like these, but I thought it was a good place to start off and maybe just start asking some questions and hoping to find some answers. So, without further ado, let's jump into my 10 burning questions that I have about gaming currently. Number one, what is the exact testing process of video games? Is it like test screenings for movies, or how much editing can you do? How much changes can be done? Like, we all know that there has to be some sort of form of testing for video games for it to be pushed out, despite some of us not believing that by some of the quality of products we have seen in recent times and in the past. Like, yeah. But there is actual a lots of testing that does go on, and they are categorized in quite a few places. One of them is UX testing, which is the user interface. That is kind of the best experience to players. How does it flow logically? What is the player reaction towards events, possibly story beats or gameplay or whatever? Like, what is the overall thing? And then obviously the user interface, such as the HUD, the heads-up display, the inventory, whatever, such sort of systems. You also get play testing, which is the core testing during development, which is like you get gross play testing, which is the first time testing basics. You got in-house testing, which is contracted people testing out the game, making sure everything's working fine. Blind testing, which is people not involved in the game development and coming in to kind of give their opinion and formulate something about the game. Then the final play testing would be the last round during the last bits of development. We also get QA testing, which is quality assurance. This is a huge part as well. They do functionality testing, which means, does it function as expected, the game? Is everything in working order? Are there still some sort of things we need to polish? They also test game issues like updates, server management if it's an online game, and so on. They also test configurations and setup. This is called clean house testing. They test configurations and setups, usually that the consumer have. So think of PCs. You know, what type of PC builds would the consumer have out there? Because not everyone has a monster build or a big rig, basically. And they need to test more or less what is the standard out there. Also, just for consoles, if there's any technical issues, and all other devices. We also have combinatorial testing, which is the path and state testing in games, branching storylines. NPCs, you know, are they working during quests, or do they work differently after you've completed some quest? A big one to think about this would be The Witcher 3, that does that combinatorial thing really well, where it branches off the storyline, changes quests around depending on how you complete it, and so on. Tree testing, which is also just the functional requirements like quests being level locked or armor, and if the perks of the armor are working, and so on. And that's the big part. Now you get to beta testing, which is the real life end users. That's us. That's where our feedback comes in, and they go back and polish the game. But we've seen beta tests now in the past. A lot of the games released with both a private and a public open beta. And yeah, that just begs the question, with all this testing in mind, why do still so many games have a little bit of a broken state coming out? Day one patches, or just really release in really poor condition? Is it the outsourcing, because this is a system, or this is a part of the whole development that can get outsourced? Outsourcing can be good and stuff like that, but remember, the real feedback you want is from the end client, the people playing the game in this case. Because the thing is, your game devs can give you feedback, sure. The people playtesting the game in your company can give you feedback, sure. All of them can give you feedback, which could be valuable, but remember, you're not selling them the game. You're selling the end client the game, the actual person who's going to be buying your game. So their opinion kind of triumphs over the rest. But I digress. Just something to ponder about, knowing that all of this testing is taking place, and sometimes it just doesn't feel that way. Question number 2 of that very long question. Why did the real-time strategy die? I've spoken about this before in my other video about the 10 like game ideas I have, but they were the AAA of the late 90s. They kind of defined a generation of gamers who had to strategize and find tactical advantages and played, in sort of not just a competitive style, but also in a more Ford said this like, no, you just came off shooters and all that. And not to say shooters are just a big dumb shooting thing, but compare that to the real-time strategy and it's completely a different ballpark. But we had Command and Conquer, we had StarCraft, we had Total War, Age of Empires, and more. And it kind of felt like maybe the MOBA, the multiplayer online battle arena, was poised to take that over, maybe. Because it was perhaps inspired. StarCraft had a more fast-paced gameplay and relied more on like the fast reactions of the player rather than the strategy and all that. And it worked better for esports, obviously, because it's way more exciting to watch something fast-paced. So that's where something like Dota really dominated. And then the real-time strategy faded more and more into turn-based strategy because the real-time was being taken over by Dota and all the others. And maybe they also devolved a little bit more into hero warfare that was present because MOBA was excelling of that as well. I still think real-time strategy can and should be back. Like, it's still a unique genre with a lot to offer, especially with the changes in AI and their advancements in our technology and that, and the ability that we can render larger things like maps and more buildings and more units and whatever. I miss it, man. I really do miss it. Question 3. Why are games not preserved? Quite a serious one. I don't know if you guys are aware about like our lack of preservation of games, but there are a lot of articles about that, lovely reads as well. But we have been around now for almost like more than 50 years actually, and we do not really have reliable archives, especially for older games. We have movies dating back from 100 years that we can still watch. They're well preserved digitally and physically, and we can still watch them if you go and put it on now. So, who's to blame here? Is it the publishers? Is it the console that they were released on? Who's at fault here? Because honestly, like the games, it's kind of sad to lose a lot of the spear of these games. There are good people out there, like looking after them, like GOG, Good Old Games, the website, and some other ones online, people online that are selling the abandonware essentially. Like the game literally became abandonware. And they have salvaged it and trying to brought it back, but yeah, it's just kind of we need to get to that point where it doesn't happen. Like, when do we think of a game becoming abandonware? How can we prevent that? And what is the way forward? Is it something like maybe that's Atari's doing, that's bringing back the retro games and kind of digitally restoring them in a way and stuff like that? Or what's the way forward? Because I really don't want games to just fall into the oblivion. Question 4. Will we ever see another console emerge? I have thought about this a little while, and obviously, it's just, we used to have so many, and it felt like everyone had their own unique kind of toy to it. Now, like, that did contribute to something like the video game crash and the oversaturation of the video game market at the time, and the fact that, like, the quality of the games back then released were not to be cheered and celebrated about because they were all quite not up to par. So maybe that's because of that. It could be also because PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo have basically a huge monopoly on it. But Atari, as I just mentioned, came back. It preserved the retro games. Like, it had an actual function, digitally restoring and preserving those retro games. And there are still big companies out there. I mean, I've been thinking about it, but what about Tencent? Tencent is already massively invested into the mobile gaming scene with the Chinese market. Now, it doesn't obviously seem to us because that's just one country, but we're talking about China here. That's 1 billion people. That's a huge economy. And Tencent is managing to capture them exclusively. So wouldn't it make sense at some point for them to bring out a console? Maybe time will tell. Maybe I'm talking about this and it's going to release like imminently. Question number 5. Why is religion portrayed negatively in a lot of games? This is always bugged me a little bit. Like, is it for storyline? Is there kind of just a way to go out there? This is the way they want to portray it because this is the most entertaining. But it's almost always like it's cult-like, or it's shown in crazy or unhinged characters. Someone that doesn't seem right in their head, and then religion becomes a function for that, literally. I don't always mind it. It's fictional stuff. Like, I can play a game and I can feel in my head, no, it's a fictional story. There's no contemplation. They're not forming an opinion or anything. Although some fiction is still a bit too much for me. Like, for example, what they did in Outlast 2 was a little bit on the sketchy side for me in terms of like everything they said and all that. But yeah, it's just that sometimes I also don't mind if it has some historical accuracy behind it, like what they portrayed in some Assassin's Creeds or in some Kingdom Come games. Like that's fine with me. But yeah, no, it doesn't always have to be bad. Can't we talk about the positive values about it, and can't we talk about what it can bring for someone, the spirituality it can bring for someone or something like that. Like I'm not talking about the most action packed games here that's going to have a lot happening, but there are generally important messages that we can convey about religion that it can deliver. Like we don't have to be pro anything. I'm not saying make a pro Christian, pro Islam, pro Hindu, pro Buddhist, pro anything game. Just talk about religion in terms of what it means to us as humans. And it can make strong and complex characters as well. Remember the pastor from Mafia 3? That was a human with so much, trying to do so much good and trying to be so close to the Lord and all that. And they failed in their human sense a lot of the times, but they still tried. And they had an incredibly complex and beautiful kind of story on the scene. But like, I'd like to see more characters of that. And I'd like to see more positive portrayal of religion. Question 6. When will natural language processors integrate more into games? So that's your ChatGPT, that's your Siri, that's your Alexa, that's your other more advanced also stuff. It could help more to make more organic dialogue in games, I guess, which is kind of ironic because it's coming from an AI. But we can ask anything to NPCs then. You can have like varying results. Like it doesn't always have to directly contribute to move the game forward. You can literally just talk to NPCs and see what their reaction are to things. But you can also use it to similarly maybe change paths in games. You remember Deus Ex, the original Deus Ex? The more you talked with people, it was like an emerging gameplay thing, but the more you talked with people, the more information you got about your mission, the more like you got out of it. Maybe you learned from, if you ask a janitor something, you can learn about the vents in a building, or if you can convince someone to give you a key, they'll give you a key and you can completely bypass a section in the game. They'd have that sort of unique emerging gameplay when you can talk to NPCs and all that. And maybe, you can bury that somewhere in the AI. If you say the right things, you can activate it. Something like Disco Elysium as well, that had incredible focus on the dialogue and how characters will change, giving you information, or how they will change towards you once you learn more about them. Ubisoft is developing something like that called the Ghostwriter tool. So could we see that in their projects, or what is the scope of that going to be? But again, the other side of the argument is we already saw the SAG-AFTRA strikes, we already saw the Writers Guild strikes in the movies, particularly about this thorny AI issue, among other things, so be careful of that. Question 7. Should the pre-order still exist? I feel like it's an outdated method. It definitely had its purpose back then. Back when we were only on physical copies, and you'd have to go to a store, and the store would obviously have limited supply, and you'd pre-order. You'd pay a little bit extra for pre-order at a premium, and that would mean you are guaranteed a copy once you go to the store and you go and pick it up. That's fine, all and dandy. But now we come with digital copies, and the things have changed in terms of how available our physical copies are and stuff like that. Like, pre-orders have made a negative context in games, and that's more like we have to change our mindset, but maybe this is just the easier way of doing it. But like, pre-orders have brought us into the hype of a game and can be a source of frustration, especially when there's a delay. Like, I just feel like there's no more need for a pre-order when you can just buy it on day one if you really want it. There's no guarantee a pre-order provides anymore, but maybe perhaps the only incentive is if you get the game a little few days early. But what does that matter, really? So I feel like instead of pre-orders, maybe we could do more beta testing and more early access like what Steam does, and other things to make a more complete game on release, instead of buying into a pre-order and kind of buying into maybe a promise that would not meet our expectations. Question 8. When did photorealism become a selling point? So yeah, I never really understood this because I wasn't a big guy with a PC and all that. I was mostly on my console, so I'm not big into graphics. But from a technical standpoint, I do understand. Manufacturers always wants to show you its hardware and its potential. You got the Intel versus the AMD, Xbox versus PlayStation. They do want to go out there and say, like, this is that we can go in native 4K, we can have up to this resolution, up to this hertz frequency thing, whatever. But technology-wise, yeah, we do want to see. We also have better game engines. Like we have Unreal Engine 5 that's more realistic than ever before, especially with that meta humans thing. That's freaky, freaky realistic. But does it play into Uncanny Valley? Maybe like with especially with AI on the rise, do we kind of feel compelled to like always look for something in a game that's like not quite too realistic, like something that catches us off guard? But I don't know. It's just become kind of the accepted norm in a way. And I think realism is fine. There's nothing wrong with realism, but I think photorealism is kind of excessive, you know? I think there's games out there with stunning visuals that are not exactly photorealistic. Disco Elysium is one of them. The beautiful visuals of movies, even like Into the Spider-Verse and all that. And any game you can think of, really, there's some stunning visual in the game, but it's not exactly always photorealistic. It's kind of like art, you know? A beautiful painting for me is worth more than drawing a realistic face. Number 9. How do movie scores and video game scores differ? And no, not a high score. We're talking about the scores that, like, the track list, essentially. Basically how the game's theme, music, and all that. So, how is it, like, similar now, and how different was it back then? Because, I mean, back then in games, it was basically just 8-bit music. If you remember from the arcade or from your first console games and stuff like that, it was just 8-bit music people would develop. And they were wonderful little tunes, especially when they got it right. They are very memorable ones out there, like the Mario one, obviously the Zelda one. Some of the Sega Genesis ones were wonderful. So yeah, now it's an entire orchestra. Like, I remember one of the moments I had this realization was when there was a Assassin's Creed 3 concert, where literally an entire symphony went on stage and played the Assassin's Creed 3 theme, and that gave me goosebumps and everything. But how does it work in gaming? You know, how does it differ from movies? Because obviously there are events triggering cutscenes and combat and stealth, etc. And obviously the score for that changes. You're not going to have a happy go singy song when you're in combat, and you're not going to have a bombastic tune playing when you're trying to do stealth in a game. So it has to differ. So is there a difference really, or has it kind of integrated into one another, especially also with the jobs that it has? And question 10, well, question 10 is up to you. As I said before in a lot of my other videos, I like this to be very interactive and inquisitive experience, and I'd love to hear from you. What would your question be towards gaming? Maybe we can help each other out, maybe we can have some people in the comments answer things, or maybe we can find answers together. But yeah, I'd love to hear some of your questions as well. Leave them please down in the comments below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed my little trip down kind of research and trip down like what I want to see perhaps basically change in gaming, or just have my questions answered. But again, it was a fun video to make. Maybe I'll make some more if I have some more questions coming through. But until then, thank you guys as always for listening, having listened to my rumbles and rants and everything. And yeah, I hope you guys had a great time about it. But other than that, expect more videos in the future. And until then, I'll see you all soon. Stay safe and take care.